If you're wondering how to deploy and monitor your application without worrying about underlying infrastructure while maintaining high availability, you have landed at the right place. I'm Archana from Edureka, and I welcome you to this session on Elastic Beanstalk, a web application hosting platform offered by Amazon. So without any delay, let me give you a brief overview of what we will be discussing today. Firstly, we will see what Elastic Beanstalk exactly is, and then we'll discuss certain salient features of Elastic Beanstalk. Moving on, we'll try to understand Elastic Beanstalk a little deeper by taking a look at its components and then at its architecture. And finally, we'll try to deploy an application on Elastic Beanstalk for practical understanding of the concept. What is Elastic Beanstalk? If I have to define Elastic Beanstalk in Amazon terminology, then it is a platform as a service where you can deploy your application which you might have developed with programming languages like Java, .NET, PHP, Node.js, and many others on familiar servers such as Apache, Nginx, Passenger, and Tomcat. The definition which I just mentioned seems to have a lot of technical terms, isn't it? Well, let's try to figure out what Elastic Beanstalk is in simple terms. Alright, let's say you need to build a computer tonight. Well, you have two ways to go at it. First, you can go to a computer warehouse. Computer warehouse is a place where you have different components of computer laid out in front of you. Like you have CPU, motherboards, router, disk drive, modems, and many other components. You can choose whichever component you need and assemble them and form a brand new computer. This is similar to a situation when you try to deploy an application without using Elastic Beanstalk. When you try to develop an application by yourself, you'll have a list of tasks which you need to do. Like you might have to decide on how powerful you want your EC2 instance to be. Then you have to choose a suitable storage and infrastructure stack for your application. You might have to install separate softwares for monitoring and security purposes as well. Moving on to option B, you can always visit an electronic retail store which has pre-configured computers laid out in front of you. Let's say you're a graphic designer and you want a computer which has a modern graphical user interface installed in it. All you have to do is specify this requirement to a salesperson and walk out with a computer of your choice. Well, I personally prefer this option. This is similar to the situation where you're trying to deploy an application using Elastic Beanstalk. When you use Elastic Beanstalk to develop your application, all you have to do is concentrate on your code. Rest of the tasks like installing EC2 instances, auto-scaling groups, maintaining security and monitoring, etc. is done by Elastic Beanstalk. That is the beauty of Elastic Beanstalk. So let's go back and take a look at definition again and see if we'll understand it this time. Well, Elastic Beanstalk is a platform as a service where developers just have to upload their application. Load balancing, auto-scaling, and application health monitoring are all handled automatically by Elastic Beanstalk. Now let's try to understand how Elastic Beanstalk as a platform as a service is beneficial to an app developer. I'm sure most of you know what platform as a service is, but let's try to refresh what we know. Platform as a service is a cloud computing service which provides you a platform where you can deploy and host your application. Elastic Beanstalk makes the process of app development much more fun and less complex, and I have 5 points to prove that to you. Firstly, it offers quicker deployment. Suppose you're developing an app by yourself, then you'll have to do a lot of tasks by yourself. Like you might have to decide on EC2 instance, choose a suitable storage and infrastructure stock, as well as install auto-scaling groups as well, and then you might have to install separate softwares for monitoring and security purposes. Well, this will take quite a lot of time. But if you have used platform as a service to develop your app, then all you have to do is develop a proper code for your application. Rest will be handled by platform as a service or Elastic Beanstalk in this case, which makes the entire process of app development much more faster. Secondly, Elastic Beanstalk simplifies entire app development process. Like I said, all developers have to do is concentrate on developing a code for their application. Rest, like monitoring servers, storage, network, etc., and managing virtualization, operating system databases is done by Elastic Beanstalk, which simplifies the entire process for a developer. Using platform as a service to deploy application makes entire app development process more cost effective. If you're trying to deploy an app by yourself, then you might have to install separate softwares for monitoring and security purposes, and I'm sure for that you'll have to pay a lot of money, extra money. But If you're using an Elastic Beanstalk to deploy your application, it will provide you all this additional softwares as a package, and you can avoid paying unnecessary operating costs. Also, Elastic Beanstalk offers multi-tenant architecture. By that I mean it makes it easy for the users to share their application on different devices, and that too with high security. When I say high security, Platform as a Service will provide you a detailed report regarding your application usage, different people or users who are trying to access your application as well. With this information, you can be sure that your application is not under any cyber threat. And finally, Platform as a Service provides you an option where you can know if the user who is using your application is getting a better experience out of it or not. With Platform as a Service, you can collect feedback at different stages of your app development, like during development stage, like testing stage, production stage, design stage. By doing so, you'll have a report regarding how your application is performing at every level, and you can make improvements if needed. So this is how Platform as a Service like AR and Elastic Beanstalk makes it easy for developer to develop an all-around perfect app. Guys will be able to relate to this point when we try to deploy an application using Elastic Beanstalk in the later part of the session. You will understand how Elastic Beanstalk is beneficial to our app developer. In market, there are quite a lot of application hosting platforms which are providing platform as a service. Let's have a look at few of them. First, we have something called OpenShift. It is a web hosting platform offered by Red Hat. Then you have Google App Engine, which we all know. A Scalingo, it is a platform as a service where you can deploy your application in just 2 minutes. Apparently, it will provide you a production-ready environment where all you have to do is deploy your application code. Then you have Python Anywhere. It is an online integrated development platform and web hosting service as well, but based on Python language. Then you have Elastic Beanstalk offered by Amazon. Moving on, we have Azure App Services by Microsoft and many others. But today, our main focus will be on Elastic Beanstalk, which is a web hosting platform offered by Amazon. Now that you have basic understanding of Elastic Beanstalk, let's go ahead and take a look at few of its features. Mostly, all these features are similar to the ones which we discussed earlier. Like Elastic Beanstalk makes an app development process more faster and simpler for developer. Moreover, all developer has to do is concentrate on developing code. Rest of the configuration details and managing and monitoring details will be handled by Elastic Beanstalk. Also, Elastic Beanstalk automatically scales up your AWS resources which have been assigned to your application by Elastic Beanstalk based on your application specific needs. But there is one feature which is specific to Elastic Beanstalk. Suppose you have deployed an application using Elastic Beanstalk, but now you want to make changes to the configurations which have been already assigned to your application by Elastic Beanstalk. Though Beanstalk is a platform as a service, it provides you with an option where you can change the pre-assigned configurations like you do in infrastructure as a service. Well, if you remember, if you're trying to use infrastructure as a service to deploy your application, you will have full control over AWS resources. Similarly, Beanstalk also provides you with full control over your AWS resources, and you can have access to the underlying resources at any time. Let's try to understand Elastic Beanstalk a little deeper. First, we'll be discussing a few components of Elastic Beanstalk, then we'll have a look at its architecture. Let's see what we have here first. We have something called application. Suppose you have decided to do a project. So what you do, you go ahead and create a separate folder on your personal computer which is dedicated to your project. Let's say your project needs Apache server, SQL database, and a platforming software like Eclipse. So you install all these softwares and store them in the folder which is dedicated to your project. So that will be easy for you to access whenever you need all the softwares. Similarly, when you try to deploy an application on Elastic Beanstalk, Beanstalk will create a separate folder which is dedicated to your application. And in AWS terms, this folder is what we call an application. If I have to define folder or application in technical terms, then it is a collection of different components like environments, your application versions, and environment configuration. Let's try to understand each of these components one by one. We have something called application version. Suppose you have written a code, stored it in a file, and deployed this code on Elastic Beanstalk, and your application has been successfully launched. But now you want to make certain changes to the code. So what you do? You go ahead, open the file, make changes to it, save it, and then again deploy it on Elastic Beanstalk. Elastic Beanstalk again successfully launches your application. So you have two versions of your application now. It's just a copy of your application code but with different changes. And Elastic Beanstalk will provide you with an option where you can upload different versions of your application without even deleting the previous ones. Then we have something called environment. Environment is a place where you actually run your application. When you try to launch an Elastic Beanstalk environment, Beanstalk starts assigning various AWS resources like EC2 instances, auto scaling groups, load balancer, security groups to your application. The point which you have to remember is at a single point of time, environment can run only a single version of your application. But Elastic Beanstalk will provide you with an option where you can create multiple environments for your single application. Suppose I want a different environment for different stages of my app. Like I want an environment for development stage, one for production stage, and one for testing stage. I can go ahead and do that, create a different environment for different stages of my application. And suppose you have same version or different version of your application installed on all these environments, it's possible to run all these application versions at same time. I hope that was clear. Well, you'll understand them practically when we try to deploy an application in the later part of the session. Then we have something called environment tier. When you try to launch an Elastic Beanstalk environment, Elastic Beanstalk asks you to choose among two environment tiers, which are web server environment and then you have worker environment. If you want your application to handle HTTP requests, then you choose web server environment. And if you want your application to handle background tasks, that is where a worker environment comes into picture. I'll show which to choose, either web server or worker environment and how to work with them when we'll try to deploy an application in the later part. And lastly, we have something called environment health. Based on how your application is running, Beanstalk reports the health of your web server environment and it uses different colors to do so. First, gray indicates that your environment is currently being updated. Let's say you have installed one version and now you're trying to upload different version, but it's taking a lot of time. So that time it shows gray color. It means your environment is still under updating process. Then you have green, which means that your environment has passed the recent health check. Then you have yellow, which means that your environment has failed one or more checks, and red failed 3 or more checks. Moving on, let's try to understand the architecture of Elastic Beanstalk. Like I said earlier, when you try to launch an Elastic Beanstalk environment, Beanstalk asks you to choose among two different environment tiers. Firstly, we have web server environment. Web server environment usually handles HTTP requests from clients and it has different components. Firstly, we have something called environment. You know what environment is? It's a place where we actually run your application and Beanstalk provides you with an option where you can create multiple environments. And the main point is, at a point of time, this particular environment can run only one version of your application. Moving on, we have something called Elastic Load Balancer. Let's say your application is receiving a lot of requests. So what Elastic Load Balancer does is, it distributes all this request among different EC2 instances so that all the requests are handled and no request is being denied. What actually happens is, when you launch an environment, a URL is created and this URL in the form of CNAME is made to point Elastic Load Balancer. CNAME is nothing but an alternate name for your URL. So when your application receives a request, all these requests are forwarded to Elastic Load Balancer and this load balancer distributes these requests among EC2 instances of auto scaling group. Then we have auto scaling group. Well, if your web server is trying to handle a lot of traffic and it's having a scarcity of EC2 instances, then auto scaling group automatically installs few EC2 instances. Similarly, if traffic is very low, then it automatically terminates underused EC2 instances. Then we have EC2 instance. So whenever you try to launch an Elastic Beanstalk environment, Beanstalk will assign your application with a suitable EC2 instance. But the software stack, like the operating system, the servers, and different softwares which are supposed to be installed on your instance are decided by a device called container type. For example, let's say my environment has an Apache Tomcat container. So what it does, it installs Amazon Linux operating system, Apache web server, and Tomcat software on my EC2 instance. Similarly, depending on your application requirements, it installs different software stack on your EC2 instances. Then we have a software component called Host Manager, which runs on every EC2 instance that has been assigned to your application. This Host Manager is responsible for various tasks. Firstly, it will provide you a detailed report regarding performance of your application. Then it provides instant level events. It monitors your application log files as well, and it monitors your application server. You can view all these metrics, log files, and create various alarms on CloudWatch monitoring dashboard. Then you have security groups. Security group is like a firewall to your instance. Not anybody can access your instance. It's just for the security purposes. So Elastic Beanstalk has a default security group which allows client to access your application using port 80. You can define more security groups if you need. And then Elastic Beanstalk also provides you with an option where you can define a security group for your database for security purposes. Moving on, we have something called worker environment. First question that comes to our mind is, what is worker? Well, suppose your web server has received a request from client, but on the way, while it's trying to process the request, it has come across tasks which are consuming a lot of resources and taking a lot of time, because of which it's quite possible that your web server might deny other requests. So what it does, it forwards these requests to something called worker. This worker handles all these tasks on behalf of web server. So basically, worker is a process that handles background tasks which are time intensive and resource intensive. And in addition, if you want, you can use worker to send email notifications, to generate metric reports, and clean up databases when needed. Let's try to understand why we need worker with the help of use case. So I have a client. He has made a request to web server, and the web server has accepted the request, and it starts processing the request. But while it's processing the request, it comes across tasks which are taking a lot of time. Meanwhile, this client has requested or sent another request to web server. Since web server is still processing the first request, it denies second request. So what is the result of this is, the performance and the number of requests accepted by your web server will drastically decrease. Alternatively, let's say a client has made a request and your web server has accepted it and it starts processing the request. And again, it comes across tasks which are taking a lot of time. This time what it does, it transfers or it passes all these tasks to worker environment. And this worker environment will handle all these tasks. And request 1 is successfully completed. Meanwhile, if it receives a second request, since it has completed processing request 1, it will accept request 2. I hope the scenario was clear. Well, all we are doing by installing worker environment is we are avoiding spending a lot of time on single request here. Now you know what web server environment is and worker environment is, and why do we need worker environment. But there has to be some way so that this web server environment can pass on this task to worker environment. Let's see how. So you have your web server environment. It has received a request, and while processing, it has encountered tasks which are taking a lot of time. So what it does, it creates an SQS message. SQS is a simple queue service offered by Amazon. And this message is then put into SQS queue. And the different requests are arranged based on priority in the SQS queue. Meanwhile, when you're trying to install worker environment, Elastic Beanstalk installs something called daemon. What this daemon does, it pulls SQS message from SQS queue. And then it sends this task to web application which is running on worker environment. As a result or as a response, this Beanstalk application handles all this tasks and responds with an HTTP response option. So this is how the entire process of handling tasks, transferring and then handling tasks goes on. So you have a client. He has made a request to web server, but the web server is encountered with tasks which are time consuming and resource consuming. So it passes this request to SQS queue. And when you try to install worker environment, there's a daemon which pulls out all these messages or tasks from your SQS queue. And then this daemon sends all these tasks to your application. Application resolves all these tasks and then it responds with a HTTP response option. So this is how your two applications communicate. I think that was a lot of theory. Don't worry, we have arrived at the fun part of the session where we'll be trying to deploy an application using Elastic Beanstalk. Here, by creating an application on Elastic Beanstalk practically, you'll understand different concepts, its architecture, and different environment ties and all this. So let's go ahead. So this is my AWS management console. And if you want to take a look at all the services, then you have all the services here. But we're mainly concerned with Elastic Beanstalk, which I've recently used. So it shows the all recently used resources or services here. So I'm going to choose that Elastic Beanstalk. And this is my Beanstalk console. If you're trying to deploy an application for first time, this is the page where you land. When we scroll down, it says that I can deploy an application in 3 easy steps. All you have to do is select a platform of my choice, then upload an application code if I have one, or use a sample application code, and then run it. Let's see if it's as easy as it says here. So go ahead and click on create new application option here. It'll ask you for application name and description. I'm going to name my application as Tomcat app. Then description as my new web app. And then I'm going to click on this create option. See, when I try to create an application, it has created a separate folder which is dedicated to my application. And in that folder, we have different components. As you can see here, I have my environment, then I have application versions, and if I've saved any configuration, it will show all the saved configurations here. Now let's go ahead and create an environment. On the right side, you see an actions option, and you click on that, you get different choices. You can just select create environment here. So again, it's asking you to choose among two different web environment tiers. You have web server environment and worker environment. In web server environment, your application handles HTTP requests from clients. Then you have worker environment, where your application will process background tasks like time-intensive and resource-consuming tasks. In this demo, I'm going to work only with web server environment. You can go ahead, explore, and create worker environment once you understand how to deploy an application on Elastic Beanstalk. So I'm going to click on the select option here. It will take me to a page where I'll have to give a domain name, or in technical terms, a URL to my application. You can give any URL of your choice and see if it's available. So let's say my Tom app, and let's see if it's available. It says the domain name is available. Then description, I'm going to give it the same as before. So my new web app. Then when I scroll down, it asks me for a platform of my choice. There are different options. You have Go, then you have .NET, Java, Ruby, PHP, Node.js, Python, Tomcat. And if you're trying to deploy an application on the platform which is not here, you can configure your own platform and deploy it on Elastic Beanstalk. It provides you an option. Here you can see there's a custom platform here. So I'm going to choose Tomcat platform for my application. And since I'm not any kind of developer, I'm just going to go ahead and use the sample application provided by Amazon. But if you have any application code, if you have created or developed some code, you can store that in a file and upload here. It says you can upload your code. Then you have a zip. You need to convert your file to zip or WAR file and then upload it here. So I'm going to just select sample application and then click on create environment here. So it's going to take a while for Elastic Beanstalk to launch my environment. Though it's not as much time as it would have taken me to develop entire application by myself. While Elastic Beanstalk is trying to launch environment, let's discuss some points. In the earlier part of the session, we discussed some benefits of Elastic Beanstalk. Firstly, I said that it fastens your process of developing an entire app. So it's true, doesn't it? All I did was select the platform of my choice. Rest is done by Elastic Beanstalk itself. So thereby it's saving a lot of time. Similarly, it simplifies the process of app development. Again, all I did was select a platform of my choice, like installing EC2 instances, security groups, auto-scaling groups, and assigning IP addresses. Rest is done by Elastic Beanstalk. I even mentioned a point where I said that it will provide, Elastic Beanstalk provides you with an option where you can change the pre-assigned configuration. We'll explore that once the environment is created. Let's go ahead and see what Elastic Beanstalk is doing. It says that it has created a storage for my environment where S3 bucket, so that all my files where I have my application code are stored there. Then it has created a security group as well, an Elastic IP address. Then it says it's launching an EC2 instance. So you see, it's as easy as that. All you have to do is select a platform of your choice. Rest is handled by Elastic Beanstalk. And later on, if you're not satisfied, if you want to change some configuration, you can go ahead and do that. Here, look at this. This is the IP address or domain name which I assigned to my app. It says new instance has been added. And in addition, it's showing each task while it's doing. Isn't that cool? You'll know what your environment is currently doing. So it's still taking a while. So it says it has installed and added instance to my application, and my environment has been successfully launched. It has finished almost all the tasks. It should have taken to environment page now. So this is my environment page, or you can say a dashboard. First, you have environment health here. It says green. It means that my environment has successfully passed the health check. Then it shows the sample version of your application. Since I've used the sample application, it's saying sample application here. Since I've chosen Tomcat as my platform, it has installed suitable infrastructure stack like Amazon Linux, and you have Java 8 programming language. Let's go ahead and explore this page. First, we have something called configurations here. Like I said, though it is a platform as a service, it provides you with an option where you can change configuration. So you will have full control of your resources. First, we have something called instances here. When I click on modify option, you can see that Elastic Beanstalk has assigned micro instance to my application. If I want, I can go ahead and change it to different instance based on my application requirement. Scrolling down, I have CloudWatch monitoring. If I want detailed monitoring, then I can go for 1 minute. If I want basic monitoring and not so detailed monitoring, then I can choose 5 minutes here. Then I have an option of assigning storage to my application as well. It says we have magnetic storage, general purpose, and provisioned IOPS as well. When we scroll down again, we see different security groups. I can just click on that and the security group will be added to my application. So once you've made the changes, you can click on apply option here. Though I haven't made any changes, I'm just going to click here. So now Elastic Beanstalk is trying to update my environment. So it's showing gray color here. If you recollect, I mentioned during the earlier part that gray indicates my environment is being updated. Okay, let's go back to configurations. We did have a look at instances. Then you have something called capacity. Apparently, Elastic Beanstalk is assigned a single instance to my application. If I want, I can go ahead and change to auto scaling groups. You have an option called load balancer. You can click on that here. And you can set the minimum and maximum number of instances that your auto scaling group can install as well. Then if you have chosen a load balancer option earlier, then a load balance would have been enabled here. Then we have monitoring details, which provides you with two options, enhanced monitoring and basic monitoring. And when we scroll down, you can see a streaming to CloudWatch logs option here. So if you want your log files, you can view them on CloudWatch dashboard as well. You can set the retention period according to your choice. And suppose you want your application for some private purpose, then you can generate a private VPC for your application. Similarly, you can add or decrease the amount of storage as well. So by explaining all this, what I want to say is your hands are not tied. You can make changes to configurations if you want. Then we have logs option. If you want to have a look at the last 10 lines of your log files, then you have an option. It says last 100 lines. Then if you want full log files, then you click on that. It will provide you a file in download format. You can just download it. Then we have health option here, where it provides the health of your AWS resources. Basically, it shows EC2 instance here. It says it's been 7 minutes or 6 minutes since my EC2 instance has been installed. Then you have monitoring, where it shows different monitoring details like CPU utilization, network in, network out. If you want, you can go ahead and create an alarm with alarm option here. Suppose you want a notification to be sent to you when the CPU utilization or when the number of EC2 instances are scarce in your auto scaling group. Then you have events here. Events basically are nothing but it's a list of things which has happened since you started launching an environment. When I go down, it says we have seen earlier on the black screen, the same things are applied here. So it says create environment is starting. Then we saw that EC2 instance has been installed, security groups, elastic IP address. So basically, it shows all the events that has happened from the time Elastic Beanstalk has started to launch your environment until the time you terminated the environment. So that's it. Then you have tag files. You can assign different key values as well. Let's go back. This is a sample application which I've tried to use. Now let me try to upload and deploy a new application version here. Okay, I'm going to go to documentation here. I'm interested with Elastic Beanstalk. I'm going to select on that and then developer guide. Click on getting started here. When you scroll down and deploy a new application version here, based on your sample application, you have different versions of your application. Since I've selected a Tomcat as my platform, I have a Tomcat zip file here. I have already downloaded that. So I'm just going to upload the file there. So let's go back and it says upload and deploy. But let's go back to our folder. Then there's an application versions option here. So it gives you deploy and upload option separately here. I'm just going to upload first, then we'll deploy it. Version label, new version, and upload the file. I have it here, zip file. I'm just going to attach the file and then click on upload option. The new version of my application has been uploaded, but it's not been deployed yet. So when I go back here, you can see that I can still see the same version which was there before. Now let's go back and deploy it. Okay, I'm going to select this and then I'm going to click on deploy option and select deploy here. Let's go back to environment and check. So my environment is being updated. So again, the gray color here. Once it's updated, it will show the new version name here. It is uploaded. So as you can see, it's showing the version name of my new version, application version. Like I said earlier, both my application versions are there. I haven't deleted any. You don't have to delete your application versions when you create a new one. Similarly, you can upload multiple versions of your application. Going back, actions option. Then you have load configuration. which will definitely load your configuration. Then you have save. You can save this configuration. Suppose you want to create an application with same configurations. Again, you don't have to start from the beginning, from creating application, environment, all that. You can just save the configuration and use for the other application or other environment of your application. Then you can clone your environment as well, rebuild the entire environment and terminate as well. So here I have saved configuration. If I have saved this configuration, the configuration would have been listed here, and like that configuration I can use when I'm creating a new environment. Okay, just let's see if I've explored all the options. Environment. Well, I forgot to show you one most important thing. When I click on this URL, it takes me to a page where it shows that my application has been successfully installed. Well, that's it. So now you know how to deploy an application using Elastic Beanstalk. Though I've used the sample application here, you can go ahead and upload a code of yours if you have any and try it out. Well, all the options here seems to be user friendly, so you will know what to do. It seems to be easier process. You will understand it better when you try to deploy an application by yourself. So this is it, guys. I hope the session was informative and fun. If you have any doubts, you can post them in the comment section below. Thank you.